How do you find the perfect place to stay when you travel? In this episode, Melissa, Shelley and I share how we search, book and choose accommodation along with must-have amenities, money-saving tips and our best and worst stays. Hi and welcome to the Global Travel Planning Podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Collins, who with my expert guests will take you on a weekly journey to destinations around the globe, providing travel inspiration, itinerary ideas, practical tips and more to help you plan your next travel adventure. Hello and welcome to episode 43 of the Global Travel Planning Podcast. So this week, myself, Melissa and Shelley are going to be talking about how we choose accommodation for our travels. But before we do that, we're just going to have a quick chat about what we've been up to over the last month in terms of travels, if we've done anything exciting, and what plans we have over the next month. Because I know at the end of March, that episode, we're probably going to have some exciting travels to share with you. So that's the first thing I'm going to start off with. But before I invite Shelley and Melissa to chat, I'm just going to give a big shout out to Laura Sternham-Diltz, who came on to SpeakPipe to share her travel plans for this year, which was great. So thanks, Laura, for coming on and sharing that. And remember, if you leave a message on SpeakPipe, you get a chance to have a shout out on the podcast, which is really cool. Right, let's start with you, Shelley. What have you been up to this last month? And just share again your website. That'd be good for everybody to know.
Hi, I'm Shelley with Solo Her Way, and I just returned from Sri Lanka. So I just spent about 2.5 weeks in Sri Lanka, and it was really, really nice. I enjoyed it. I traveled all around the country. I went from Colombo all the way to the hill country, and all the way back down by the beaches. So it was really nice. The culture, the food, the people were amazing. I learned a lot about the different foods, about gems, about, the different arts and crafts that they do. So it was really, really nice.
I think you'll have to come on and chat about Sri Lanka, Shelley, because Doug and I are planning to get there hopefully in April if all things work out. So it would be really good to have a chat with you so we can get some tips off you for that. So remember that Shelley from soloherway.com. Now we have, who's the Yank from our obviously Brit Aussie Yank episode at the end of every month. So let's talk to the Aussie contingent. So Melissa, how are you?
Yes, hi Tracy. Yeah, I'm really good. But look, I haven't done a lot of travel, or probably any travel in the last month. But when I'm not traveling around the world, I love getting out and exploring Brisbane. So I've been to a couple of new shows that are playing in Brisbane. You can read all about it on the brisbanetravelguide.com. But something really exciting that I've been planning at the moment, which also involves Shelley, given Shelley's in Queensland at the moment, I'm going to take Shelley up to Bundaberg in a couple of weeks, which is the southern end of the Great Barrier Reef. And super exciting, Shelley and I are going to sleep on the reef. So we're going to stay on a pontoon for the night and sleep under the stars for a night. We're also going to go to Lady Elliot Island, which you can only get to by plane. It's just been named the best snorkeling place in the world. And we also hope to see some really cute little turtles being hatched because it's that time of the season in Bundaberg. So next time we're on, me and Shelley are hopefully going to tell you all about that.
I have to say, when you told me about your plans, I was really, really jealous. I was like, oh, that sounds so amazing. So I can't wait to hear all about it. Though Doug and I fly to Morocco on Tuesday, so I shouldn't feel too sorry for myself.
That's pretty cool.
So over the next month, we're in Morocco for 10 days. We're doing an Intrepid tour, which Melissa and I did 2 Intrepid tours last year of India, which we actually still need to talk about on the podcast, which were amazing. So we decided that because we just haven't had a lot of time to book an Intrepid tour of Morocco. So that's what we're doing. We're there for 10 days, 8 days of which are the tour. And then we fly to Madrid on the 28th of February. And then we have some time in Madrid, Seville, and possibly into Portugal by the time we speak next. So that's our plans anyway.
That's amazing.
So I'm pretty excited.
Awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll catch up on that next month. But this episode, we thought we'd talk about how we choose accommodation for our travels. Now, I find it important. If you get the wrong accommodation, it can have a huge impact on your trip, for sure. But I thought what I'd start off with asking, because we're all in our kind of late 40s or late 50s. I'm not going to say who. That might be me. But as we get older, I think our preferences potentially have changed. Now, I know for me, it certainly has, and I certainly look for a little bit more of the luxury option. We do tend to mix and match, so we'll do the luxury with some more budget accommodation. And in the UK, we spend a lot of time in B&Bs. We really like B&Bs because they're local and you get to meet people, and it's just they're also cheaper, and you get a breakfast, which is a really good budget option. So, what about you, Melissa? Have your accommodation option choices changed as you've got older?
I actually don't find they really have, to be honest. I'm a bit of a budget adventure type of traveler. I guess the only thing I would say when I was in my 20s, I was happy to stay in a dorm room, which I definitely would never stay in a dorm room now. Not at all. But I'm still okay with the budget kind of thing. It doesn't bother me. There are other factors to me that are way more important when it comes to accommodation compared to price. So yeah, maybe I'm the one who's in the late 40s. So maybe when I'm ask me in 10 years when I'm in my late 50s, maybe they might have changed a little bit. But no, I don't find it's changed too much for me at this stage. No.
Okay, what about you, Shelley?
Definitely they have changed. When I first started, especially full-time traveling, I was like, oh, I can do this. I could sacrifice, whatever it was. Now, no. As time has gone by, my preferences have evolved, and I'm with you. I'm more of the luxury mid-range. It doesn't have to, for me, it doesn't have to be fancy. It just has to be clean. It has to have nice towels, nice linens, Wi-Fi, basics that some people take for granted. But when you're on the road, those basics are really important. So,
Oh yeah,
yes,
absolutely. I agree.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, so we all have kind of different preferences then when it comes to accommodation. I think, I mean, we are flexible, and just thinking about the accommodation over the next month, I'm obviously looking at places that are Airbnb type, so we can do washing, because getting your washing done on the road can be a bit difficult in hotels, especially in more expensive hotels where they seem to charge a lot of money per item to wash things. So that's something. So what about when it comes to, you're planning a trip? What is the first thing that you do when you're looking for a place to stay, Shelley?
The first thing I do is I believe in the hotel points, and so I will join. Even if I stay one time, I will join. So what I usually do, I'm planning another upcoming trip. What I'll do is I'll go on the hotel apps, I'll look and see if there's, any deals. They'll send you, percentages off, see how many points I have. I'll look that way. The other thing I do, which may be a little unconventional, maybe you ladies do the same, is I use my VPN. So I will switch my VPN to that country, that city, and then I will look for their prices, the local prices. Because oftentimes, for myself, if you're looking at a US site, and most sites have different categories, you're looking at a US site, believe it or not, they have US prices for travel. So if you switch it to another site that's maybe Spain or Italy or wherever you may choose, you might see a substantial difference in the price and also the accommodations offered, because a lot of those accommodations are not on these big sites. So those are like my two key.
Okay, what about you, Melissa, when it comes to finding accommodation?
The very first thing I do before even actually looking at accommodation is I research the area and try and work out where the best area is to stay. In my view, there's no point actually looking at accommodation until you have worked out the area you want to stay. And so to do that, I normally will look at a lot of different travel blogs and try and work out where everyone recommends to stay in terms of the area. I might map out some of the attractions I want to see and try and work out, is there a central area I want to stay? Or, using Google Maps and try and work out where the restaurants are, or, whatever. It kind of depends on the trip. But yeah, so before I even start looking at accommodation, I do my research on what area of the city I want to stay in.
Yeah, that's a good point. I have to say we tend to look at how we're getting to this place.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're going by train, then I'll look at what the area's like around the train station. If we're driving, and particularly in the UK where you've got some cities where getting parking is incredibly difficult. So you have to be thinking, if I've got a hire car, am I going to actually be able to park anywhere near the accommodation, or am I going to be miles away, and how would I feel about that? So it's checking that sort of thing. So that's something I do. I must admit, for this, just looking at hotels in Madrid the other day, I just kind of put in Madrid and just saw what came up in our price range, see, just checked where it was close to public transport, and I've kind of gone off that. I haven't booked anything yet, but that's kind of my initial research. What about reviews? Do you check reviews? Do you trust them?
Yes. I want to make one notation about the other thing about booking. I don't know if either one of you have heard of hood maps, or it's kind of like when you look at Google and you search the area. And along with Melissa, I agree. Like one of my things is it has to be walkable for me in the major areas. Well, hood maps, they will show you it's made by locals. So it's a combination of almost like an urban kind of dictionary type thing and Google combined, but they'll tell you the areas, whether it's students, whether it's, maybe retirees, maybe it's business. And it kind of goes, but it's flowing all the time and it's changing. So that's another resource. Okay, now I'll answer the other question in case he wants to fix it. Okay, I'm 50-50 on the reviews. I really don't trust a lot of the reviews. I would say a lot of sites, if you have credible websites like ours, that are people don't pay for our reviews and we're ethical about reviews, you would be surprised how many reviews are bought, and how many reviews are changed. So I look at it, I look for keywords in the review. And if any of those show a red flag, then I just move on.
That's a good idea. I must admit, I use booking.com a lot for checking out accommodation, and I always look, when I've put in my criteria, it's always an 8 review of 8 or above. I don't look at anything less than that. That's kind of our criteria. And then I do check just to see if things like if it's going to be noisy, because we were reading a review the other day, and it was something about they said something, luckily they had earplugs, and Doug was like, why does it say they've got earplugs? And then I read a bit further, and it's on this very noisy street in Madrid. There you go. So it was kind of that clue. So Doug was like, oh no, because he's a very light sleeper, so that wouldn't work for him. But what about you, Melissa? What about reviews? Do you believe them?
Okay, I'm going to say yes and no. And a little bit different from what you guys have said. Oh gosh, there's some whingers in the world. I read some, and
Wait a minute, can you translate that for the American here?
Okay. Some people will just complain about anything and everything.
Oh, okay.
I was reading something the other day, and someone was complaining about that the hotel bar they stayed at wouldn't allow them to BYO, and they gave them a 1-star review, and I was like, oh my god, okay, well, like, it's not allowed, whatever. So look, what I do is I do read reviews, but I do read a lot of them, and I choose to kind of balance it out. So I won't just read one or two and they go, oh, this place is awful. I'll read, quite a few and go kind of see overall what are people saying, because you just can't. I just think some people are super radical. But the other thing you need to think about is reviews as well, is to make sure you're looking, like you're sorting it by like recent, because sometimes the way they show reviews might be different, and to make sure you sort it by recent, because hotels change hands all the time. So, you might be reading some bad reviews and it's changed hands and now the hotel is run much better, or vice versa. It used to be run really well and now it's not. So I'm just going to say, make sure you're looking at recent reviews and just read a few and give it a balanced approach, and try to read through those 1 stars because someone's having a good old complain.
Absolutely. And I totally agree with you on that. Now, what about when you come to book a hotel? What things do you have to have in your accommodation? So not hotel, Airbnb, B&B. What is it that you're looking for? Now, I know, and I'm waiting for Charlotte to say air conditioning, because I know, because I just know that is kind of top of the list when I speak with most of the North Americans for my UK travel planning, London travel planning sites. It's always aircon is a huge. Now, really, we don't need it very often in the UK. But come on then, Shelley, what do you have to have in a hotel? I'm going to throw in their Wi-Fi. That absolutely is a total must for me. It's got to have free Wi-Fi and good Wi-Fi.
Yes, stable Wi-Fi, stable Wi-Fi. Yes, aircon, stable Wi-Fi. It has to be safe. So it goes back to the area. It goes back to whether you're in a hotel, Airbnb. So if, the locking system, like, I know that sounds petty, but the locking system on the door. I mean, is it a key card? Is it a swipe to get in and out of the building? Do you have a doorman? I mean, that for me is a big deal.
I think that's important, Shelley, because I mean, as a solo female traveler, you've got to think about those things.
Yes, and also, if it's a hotel, I like staying up on the upper floor. But besides that, I mean, my basics are, like you said, air conditioning, Wi-Fi. I have to have some place to make coffee. So if it's a tea kettle, is something just to get the first cup of coffee in the morning. That's it. Maybe a little refrigerator, but then again, I like clean, nice linens, towels, and hot water, and I'm good.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'm with you on the kettle. We have to have a kettle, and we have to have a private bathroom. Kettle, private bathroom.
Yes.
Yeah, those are kind of key considerations. It's got to have good Wi-Fi, because I can't do my job if I haven't got decent Wi-Fi. What about you, Melissa?
It kind of depends for me on the kind of trip that I'm doing. Like, there are some trips that you're kind of doing a sightseeing city trip and you might only be there for 1 or 2 nights. So my requirements might be a bit less. I might be willing to compromise a little bit more if I'm not there for long. But if I'm going to be there for like a week, or like a beachy type of holiday where I'm relaxing, then I want a little bit more. I might want space, and I might want, like you're talking about. I mean, the Wi-Fi is not huge for me as a traveler. As a blogger, then yes, I want the Wi-Fi. And yes, if it's hot, I want aircon. If it's cold, I want heating. It's just kind of a tricky one, because it kind of depends on what sort of trip you're doing as to what the requirements are. But actually, sorry, I just want to make a note as a family travel blogger. One thing that is super, super important, and maybe you guys don't know about this, is particularly in Asia. Asia thinks that 4 to 20 kids can sleep in one bed. So you will see a hotel room and it'll go sleep 10, and you look into it a bit further and it just has one bed. So I'm going to say, as a family travel blogger, it's really important that everyone has a bed, or it's a double bed for 2 people. That's so important, and it's really, really hard. Hotels, for some reason, just don't make that stuff easy. So I'm just going to say, as a family travel blogger, that everyone actually has a place to sleep, and we're not all expected to sleep together.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's a good point, because I've been in the situation as a solo female traveler where they will put me in like a twin bed, and they'll shove me like in basically a closet because I'm one person
Yeah.
and no windows.
Mm.
I mean, it's literally like a closet. So, yeah, you really have to, in certain countries, really look into that.
Mm.
And also, the other thing, Tracy, I think you said it previously, laundry. A place to do your laundry, or a place that can do your laundry. Because, especially for me, I stay longer. My average is like a month in one place, and that's essential.
Yeah, definitely. And that's easier in some places than others. You know, in Asia, it's not a problem to get your laundry done and it doesn't cost a lot of money. But traveling around Europe, which we're doing, it's really a huge consideration. And we had that when we were traveling around before Christmas, when we did about 6 different countries and Christmas markets and extra. We were all over the place. Luckily, we stayed with a friend of Doug's in Stockholm, so we could do some washing then. But it was, you know, you look at the cost of the actual hotel charges to wash stuff, and you're like, no. So we do take a washing line, and we take up those washing sheets with us as well. So we do as much as we can in the hotels. But yeah, that's it. What about, I'm going to ask about breakfast, because that's another one. I know when I look at booking, it's like, so do we take it with a breakfast or do we not? Now, quite often, so Doug loves to have his breakfast. So we kind of look at the cost and decide if it's worth it, or if it's just, you know, if we look again on Google Maps. So we've got a hotel. There's a supermarket 5 minutes away. We'll go and stock up, which is why we generally will try and always get a fridge because of that. But you know, what do you do? Do you go for breakfast or do you not? Do you book it or do you leave it?
I
What do you
don't.
do?
I don't,
No?
because I hate to say this, but sometimes I value my sleep a lot more than I do an egg. So I find myself looking at the clock and I'm like, oh, I got like 20 seconds to get down to breakfast. Never mind. I figure if I do your trick, Tracy, I'll go to the store, I'll get a couple things to have to snack on, and then I'll go out and have breakfast. Or if I'm staying in an Airbnb, I'll cook something later. But for me, it's not worth the price. And if you really, really want it, you could always purchase it.
That's true. What about you, Melissa?
Yeah, I'm probably like what you said, Tracy. Like, I'll weigh the price up, and if I think, oh wow, that's really cheap, I will do it. But otherwise, generally, no. And mainly, the main reason for me is because when I'm in a city, I want to enjoy the city. I don't want to be stuck in my hotel. So, you know, like if you're in Europe, for example, I want to go somewhere where there's a really cool square and sit on a nice table and have some breakfast while I'm watching the world go by. So, yeah, I will do it if I think it's a good price, but otherwise it's not really a big deal for me.
Actually, that's brought back a memory when you said that, Melissa, because I remember Doug and I staying at a hotel in Sarlat in the Doi Doi in France, maybe about 10 years ago, and we didn't have breakfast at the hotel, but we found this amazing cafe on this wonderful street that did Le Petit Déjeuner Complet, and that's what we had. Every morning we went and we had our little bit of breakfast and we watched the world go by. As long as we've got a cup of tea first thing in the morning, we're happy to then wait a little bit, but Doug's got to have his breakfast. That's something he's like, no, we've got to have breakfast, but as long as we find somewhere or have something in the room. The one thing, it's some places I do love breakfast. So we always stay at the same hotel in Bangkok, and they do the best breakfast in the world. And I could not stay at that hotel. It's the Chatrium at Riverside in Bangkok. So shout out to them. If I could not stay at that hotel without having the breakfast, because honestly, it is just magnificent, absolutely magnificent. Now, let's talk about location. Deciding. Now, I kind of mentioned before about for us, it's around train stations. Looking at that, I am very keen when I talk to people about where they stay in London. I say stay in the centre, because you don't want to be spending your precious time travelling in and out of a city, for example, to go and see the sights. However, I want to ask you this one, Shelley, because obviously you spend a month in a place. So I just, the thought of spending, I don't know how many thousands it would cost to spend a month in the centre of London in a hotel. So what would you do in those sort of circumstances? What would you look at for location if you wanted to stay somewhere that was, like a major tourist destination?
Well, what my strategy is usually I'll book a hotel for like 2 or 3 days. So then I get to see the area. And then either previously, which normally previously, I will have already done some research for Airbnbs or B&Bs. And then once I'm there and I have those 2 or 3 days, I do stay in the city center because I do a lot of walking, but I will go ahead and I will look physically at that area. So once I'm there, it gives me a couple days leeway to check it out. I have been known to text an Airbnb or a B&B owner and ask if I could actually see it. And sometimes they say yes, sometimes it's occupied. Um, but that's usually what I do. I tend to stay in the center. There's more things to do. The other thing that I do for location is make sure that there's many day trips I can take from that location. So I'm planning an upcoming trip after Melissa and my trip coming up in March that I want to take several day trips, but I don't want to lug my luggage like every other night. So
Can you
that's
spill the beans about where you're going? Because you mentioned about this trip. Now I need to
oh,
know, Shelley.
I'm still in the planning
Ah,
phase.
oh,
But
okay.
anyways, but I'm trying to see how far I can go out from that city center on day trips or maybe even one overnight that will be cost effective. So that plays into me for long range.
Yeah, no, that's a good tip. And I know we're looking at Madrid for 3 nights, so we'll stay in a kind of hotel in the centre. But because we're going to be in Seville for longer, I'm looking at the apartment like that's not going to be in the centre. It's going to be a little bit cheaper. And obviously, a lot of European cities as well now they don't allow Airbnbs because it's impacted so heavily on the cost of housing for residents of those cities. So yeah, I can understand why it's more difficult in terms of being able to get that accommodation that's not a hotel these days in those kind of center of those cities. What about you, Melissa, when it comes to accommodation? What do you look for location wise?
I mean, location for me is the number one thing I look at, and again, it depends on what sort of trip I'm doing. Like what you kind of touched on. If it's a city, a sightseeing sort of trip, I need to be close to the attractions or the main train station or bus stop or whatever. But I mean, I also do family trips where I might be doing like a beach trip in Asia somewhere. So I want to be, I might want to be on the beachfront, or I might want to be really close to where the main swimming area is or where the restaurants are. So it just depends on the sort of trip. But I think too many people get lost in the actual accommodation and don't think about the location. Location needs to come before accommodation.
Yeah, I guess so, and I think you're right. I mean, you have to think like if you're arriving into, like we arrived into Germany, into Berlin, center of Berlin. So we didn't stay around the Bahnhof this time because it's really expensive. But I made sure that I found accommodation that was on a direct line that we could get
Yes.
to. So yeah. I think that's important. The last thing you want to do is arrive and think, how am I going to get to my accommodation that might be 20, 25 minutes away? Because then, or even further, then you're going to negotiate public transport, which brings all sorts of other issues. And if you're driving yourself as well, you've got to think about, can you navigate safely around that city? Is there parking? All of those sort of considerations come in. Now,
just to add one thing to that, it sets off the cost also.
Yes.
So you may think you're saving money by staying a little bit further out, but by the time you pay for transportation, your time, and the aggravation sometimes, it's not worth it.
Absolutely. I was going to say that too. Like, if you're looking for somewhere cheap and you actually choose the cheapest place, it might actually not be the cheapest place, because then every day you're going to have to get a cab, or because there's no public transport or whatever, or there's nowhere nearby to get food or whatever. So you've got to,
that's something I share that a lot in terms of talking about London again, because we deal with a lot of kind of accommodation requests around London, and often, people say, well, we've got a tight budget, so we don't want to stay in the centre, so we're going to be further out, and then they'll tell us the accommodation, and it's miles away from a bus stop, it's miles away from a tube stop, it's maybe a train sometimes that they've got to get out. So by the time they've added the cost, exactly what you say, the cost of getting in and out, rush hour in London on the tube is not fun. If you're going to get cabs, it's going to cost you, and also time. And also, if you've had a busy day out sightseeing, the last thing, I certainly do not want to have a 20, 30, 40-minute walk to my accommodation. I just want to come off the public transport and then just get into my accommodation. Absolutely. So that's a huge kind of thought process. And if you've got luggage when you arrive in a place as well, dragging luggage through, you don't want to do that. So I agree. You've got to kind of consider what the style of your trip is in terms of, are you going to be, are you traveling with your family, or are you going to be, is it a beach holiday and it's just you, or have you got loads of luggage? Is it going to be a month-long trip? And then really sort of think what will work in terms of the accommodation and the area that you need to stay in. I think that's true. Now, do we book direct or do we use third-party platforms? This is a great question. Now, I have to say I've been using booking.com for years, so we do use that, and that is my go-to because I always book with free cancellation, always. So that's who I use, and kind of I'm upfront about that. Sometimes it may be more expensive, but that is how I've rolled for a long time in terms of go on booking.com and I look at it. So what about you, Shelley?
I use the hotel apps. I will also use different apps like hotel.com, Hotel Tonight, different apps. I will use the booking.com and different Airbnb, obviously. But what I'll do is I'll research everything and then I cross check it. So I'll research it on, let's say, the Bonvoy app, and then I will go on the direct website, and then I'll go on booking.com, and then I'll see which one. And then depending on if there's a huge price difference, that's the platform I'll book on. Or if I want to make sure I get my points, then I will either book direct or book from the app.
I think the thing that always puts me off about booking something like Airbnb is you've got to pay it up front. I quite like the ability to pay it when I check in. That's always a big plus for me, I have to say.
Yeah, the Airbnb, the only thing with Airbnb I've found is that it's good if you do it through the app. A lot I've run into, some owners will want to take you off the app and talk, and sometimes it's okay. But basically, if you stay on the app, Airbnb does have a resolution team. So, like you were saying, Tracy, if you pay for something up front and you get there and it's a disaster, or 2 days in, it falls apart, then if you have a valid, concern or complaint, they are I have to say, I've had really good experiences with them intervening and refunding me my money back.
Well, that's good to know. What about you, Melissa, in terms of when you come to book accommodation? What do you use?
I'm pretty much like you, Tracy. I tend to use booking.com all the time, and I only book accommodation that can be cancelled. I even if it's extra, I'm going to book accommodation that's cancelable. The funny thing is, it's really odd, is that it's actually 9 times out of 10 more expensive to book direct. I know, I'm in a lot of Facebook travel groups, and people always go, "Oh, book direct, book direct, book direct," but it's often more expensive, not cancelable, if that's a word, and just not flexible, which is really, really strange. Mostly booking.com. I will also book from Qantas because I like Qantas points, and Qantas often have some really cool deals where you'll get like crazy amounts of points. But if I don't get the crazy amounts of points, I'll just go through booking.com.
Yeah, that's true. And I think what about you, Shelley, when it comes to free cancellation? Is that something that's important for you as well?
Yeah, I was going to say, I always do free cancellation. That's one thing, if you join a lot of these hotel programs, one of the perks is you get free cancellation. So I always do that because you never know. You don't know.
No, absolutely. I remember we headed to Paris a few years ago. We actually went. One time I did not book with free cancellation. Why do things happen with the one time? The one time
Yes.
you've not done something. It's and I felt, and I was actually really ill. But we went. I got medication and I was all right. But to be honest, if we had free cancellation, I probably wouldn't have gone. But
Right.
so I always make sure that I do it now, and I always did before that. As I say, it was a kind of one-off, I think. But now let's talk about our favourite hotels or worst. We're going to talk about favourite, I think, first, and then want to talk about any horror stories or places without naming them that we've stayed at, because I think that would be good. So, what about you, Melissa? Your favourite place that you've ever stayed at?
Yeah, I mean, I did a bit of research before the podcast to try and think about this, and what I came up with is about a year or two ago, I went to Khao Sok in Thailand, which is in their jungle, and they have a big lake, and we stayed in like some overwater villas. So you're on the lake, you're in the overwater, and you can just jump off your villa straight and swimming and stuff. But you're surrounded by jungle, and so during the day and night you can hear monkeys and hear elephants. I didn't see any elephants, but I did see monkeys, but definitely heard the elephants. And yeah, it was really cool, amazing experience. And then, they've got kayaks that you can kayak around, and yeah, you're basically in the middle of nowhere, and it was super cool.
Oh, that sounds amazing. What about you, Shelley? Got a favourite?
I like Melissa, I was trying to think before the podcast, and this sounds horrible, but like I've been so many nice, really, so it's hard to pinpoint, but I could wrap up the best and the worst all together.
Okay, go for it. Go for it.
I'll answer them both at the same time. So, my first trip to Italy, I'll make this very short. First trip to Italy, I flew into Bari. So I was told Bari was going to be these little nonas rolling pasta in the street, all this stuff, all this fantasy, whatever. Okay, no. Anyways, so I went. I had booked an Airbnb, did my due diligence. I should have had the red flag when the taxi driver dropped me off very quickly and left very quickly. So I went in. It was not what it was supposed to be. Fast forward 2 hours and a lot of communication, not in English. And basically, I got kicked out of the lobby by an 85-year-old Nona. She was like maybe 4 feet tall, screaming at me in Italian. I was like, what is happening? So I'm out on the street sitting on my pink suitcase in the middle of Italy. And so fast forward, I'm like, okay, oh my God. I found a way to get to a taxi because there was no taxi, no ride share. Found a way to the taxi, looked up a hotel on one of the apps. Person didn't speak English, showed him, okay, I take you. Took me, now this is later at night, I can't see a lot of stuff. Took me and did not take me to where I was supposed to be, but it wasn't a scary thing. He just didn't know. He pulls over and I ended up I didn't know at the time until the morning, I ended up in the most beautiful town in Italy, Polignano, as you know, Tracy.
Yes.
And I was met by a very gracious host very late at night. And I was brought to a B&B, and not an Airbnb, but a B&B. And it was the old stone with a chandelier and all that. I mean, it was small, but it was gorgeous. And when I woke up the next morning, not knowing where I was, I opened up the drapes and there was the blue turquoise water, whitewashed buildings. I mean, it was amazing. So from getting kicked out by an 85-year-old Nona all the way to fast forward this fabulous, trip. I mean, and I was only supposed to stay a couple of days. I ended up staying 2.5 weeks. So,
Oh, wow.
So so you never know how things are going to go. So that was kind of like one I could think of, best and worst all together.
Yeah, no, that's it. That's quite a story, quite an experience as well, Shelley. So you're lucky that you ended up somewhere that was so amazing. Have you had any horror stories, Melissa?
Oh, I'm pretty easygoing, and nothing really bothers me that much. But probably one of my recent horror stories was when I was in the UK and I stayed at a very nice hotel, but I ended up with bed bugs, and I had bites all over my face and my arms and hands, and it was awful. Yeah, and I've travelled a lot, and this was only recent. Well, I say recently; it was probably about 2 or 3 years ago, and it was awful. But it was a very very nice hotel, so it just kind of proved to me that you kind of think of bed bugs as somewhere where you stay that's a disgusting dorm place, but this was not that, and so much so that I took photos and videos of the bed bugs, and you could obviously see them on me, and the hotel gave me my money back. So they certainly took it serious, which was good to hear. But yeah.
Oh yeah, I think it's been a huge problem in Europe over the last couple of years, actually. I'm going to say this, I'm going to touch wood here, because with all the travels I've done, I've never come across bed bugs yet, but you just know, like you say, it could be a beautiful hotel, and it just is one of those things. So yes, hopefully it will never happen. Have you ever had experienced bed bugs, Shelley, or not?
One time, and believe it or not, it was in the US.
Wow. Yeah. So there you go. You just don't know.
Anywhere. Yeah.
Well, my horror story, it was in Queensland. I have to share this with you. So Doug and I had booked this amazing place in the Daintree, and it had fabulous reviews. And it was basically like you had to go through the Daintree forest, and we had our own like little hut kind of thing, but really beautifully, like a gorgeous, just beautiful little hut. And there was like 5 or 6 of these kind of huts around this hotel. But the day we arrived, the people who owned it they'd left the day before, and basically the new owners, they weren't arriving for another week. So they basically hired a couple of people to come in and do the cooking and look after it. Well, they couldn't cook, they couldn't organise, they couldn't have run a bath, to be honest. It was awful. It was the worst. We were there, I think, for 2 or 3 nights, and it was just, honestly. And then when we checked out, they tried to charge us for the Coke that Doug had been drinking, which we had brought with us. It was just,
oh my gosh.
It was honestly, it was the worst experience, and it wasn't cheap either. The Daintree's expensive, so we have not been back to that particular place. So hopefully it'll have sorted itself out. I think we got lots of apologies from the new owners, because it was kind of between owners. But honestly, it was just not. It was not the best day that we've ever had, and we've been to some wonderful places in Queensland for sure, but that one definitely didn't impress us. That's for sure. So have you got any last minute tips or thoughts or anything that you want to share about, that we can share with our listeners about booking accommodation? I think my tip is always to do the research and spend some time thinking about where you're going to stay, whatever your budget really, and kind of check out, as Melissa said, the area. And Shelley said also check out things like, the loyalty programs, because those are a really good idea if you need to save a bit of money. Is there anything else that you think we should cover, girls?
I think the key for me is, not just me, but a tip would be flexible on your times if possible. If you could book like a shoulder season, or the other thing too is when you're looking at some of these booking, like booking.com or any of these apps, you can look at their price calendar, and you can see if the hotel is full, maybe there's a holiday that you don't know about, because many times I arrive in a country and I don't know there's a holiday. But just be flexible, because often the shoulder season, the weather's still pretty good. And if you are flexible, you'll be able to get a much better price.
Well, I'm hoping that's the case in Spain and Portugal next month.
Yes.
I will report back.
Yes, please.
Well, so I think next month's topic, which I've just made up now, I'm just going to say. So I think next month's topic, I think let's talk about packing, because that's a huge thing for me right now, because we have potentially a 3-month trip back to Australia, and I'm only taking a small little pull along bag, so I have to figure out exactly what I'm going to take with me for the next 3 months. I may be sending a suitcase back to Australia though, but so that's good. So let's talk about packing. What our big packing tips are, our packing best packing wins and hacks, and our kind of maybe our packing nightmares as well. Let's talk about those next month. But so again, just want to share with our listeners where we can find you. So whereabouts are you, Shelley, in terms of your website, social media?
It's Solo Her Way, and it's soloherway.com. And I do have travel guides for Sri Lanka. I have other information of different areas. So yeah, check me out.
Perfect. And Melissa?
My family travel website's Thrifty Family Travels. I've also got Queensland Travel Guide and Brisbane Travel Guide, and I have the Practical Travel Guide on social media.
Wonderful. I tell you what, between the three of us, we've got loads of resources, websites, the podcast, social media. Honestly, give us all a follow and make sure that you join our Facebook group. So we've got the Global Travel Planning Facebook group, but Melissa's also started a new Facebook group, which we're all in and moderating. So do you want to share that Facebook group as well, Melissa?
Oh, yes. I think, is it over 50s women's travel? I can't remember exactly the title. Is that it?
Yes.
Yes. So do you want to say that again? So it's
over 50 women's travel.
Yeah, on Facebook. So I will put links in the show notes to you guys' website, to social media, and to the Facebook groups. So do pop over and join. And as I said at the beginning, leave us a message on SpeakPipe. We'll give you a shout out. We love to hear what you're up to, where you're traveling. And yes, any questions about anything we talked about would be absolutely fantastic. So you guys have a fantastic trip to Bundaberg and Lady Elliot Island. I cannot wait to hear all about it. Shelley, we need to get on and talk about Sri Lanka at some point as well, because I'm very excited to hopefully get there in April. So until next week, that's goodbye from me. Goodbye from
me, Melissa.
And Shelley.
And happy global travel planning. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Global Travel Planning Podcast. For more details and links to everything we discussed today, check out the show notes at globaltravelplanning.com. Remember, if you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast app, because your feedback helps us reach more travel enthusiasts just like you. Anyway, that leaves me to say, as always, happy global travel planning.